Welcome to Voices from the Frontlines, bolstering collective power to end the incarceration of women worldwide. I am your moderator, Dawn Harrington, from the United States and the state of Tennessee. Thank you all for coming today. We're going to have an exciting discussion, and we're excited to dive right in. So some of you have already started doing this, but please introduce yourselves in the chat, who you are, where you work, and where you're based. All right, so now I'm going to introduce myself and my panelists for today. So my name is, as I said, Dawn Harrington. I'm the Hub Mentor for National Council for Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls. And I'm the Executive Director of Free Hearts. During my incarceration, I was disturbed by the impact of incarceration on families, especially women and children, and inspired to make a difference upon my release. Now I do abolitionist work in the United States, focusing on the liberation of women and girls. All right. Okay, I'm going to introduce the panelists. Okay, Monica Martinet is from Barcelona, Spain, is a social educator from Mujeres, a harm reduction center for women and non-binary people in the Ravel neighborhood. She was incarcerated for 6 years for offenses against public health when she was a user of injectable drugs. When she came out of prison in 2010, she studied social education and participated in support groups for incarcerated and formerly incarcerated women. Currently, she is also participating in the global network of formerly incarcerated women organized by the National Council for Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls. And we also have Claudia Cardona from Colombia. Claudia is a psychologist with an academic background focusing on human rights. She is an expert on human rights defense and advocacy with incarcerated and formerly incarcerated women. She currently works with Corporacion Humanas on the subject of incarcerated or freed women. Claudia is also the founder and director of Mujeres, Libres, Colombia, an organization of formerly incarcerated women and family members. She is a women's prison abolitionist and was herself formerly incarcerated. Grace Natalia from Indonesia has lived experience of incarceration for drug offenses, which has inspired her current dedication to paralegal work for women who use drugs. She is a director on the Women in Harm Reduction International Network board and also a leader at Women's Voice, a feminist collective of women, including trans women who use drugs from Jakarta, Bogor, Depok, Tangerang, Bekasi, which was established in early 2020. Women's Voice provides a safe space for gathering, learning, and sharing among peers to fight together for the rights of women who use drugs in the region. Phyllis Grandma Hardy from the US is the matriarch and founding member of the US-based National Council for Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls. She was sentenced to 366 months or 30 and a half years in federal prison for conspiracy to import and distribute cocaine and money laundering. She entered prison in November of 1991 and served 23 years and 5 months before being granted compassionate release on March 19, 2015. She is a leader on the front lines in the fight to end the incarceration of women and girls and leads efforts to create change in federal sentencing guidelines, to end mandatory minimum sentences, and to shift away from a penal system that separates women from their children. She presently serves as the In-Reach Outreach Coordinator for the National Council for Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls. All right. I'll also introduce Kenya. We will be seeing a video from Kenya, and unfortunately she won't be able to be here today. Kenya Cuevas from Mexico is a formerly incarcerated trans woman, as well as a human rights activist that fights for the rights of the LGBTQ plus community. In 2019, she founded Casa de las Muñecas Teresias AC, which focuses on supporting low-income, formerly incarcerated people who use drugs, people living with HIV, or anyone in the wider LGBTQ community. In 2020, she also founded Casa Hogar Paola Buenrostro, the first shelter for trans women in Latin America. So give it up for all of our panelists. All right, so we will be discussing the incarceration of women and girls around the world from the voices of women that are the most directly impacted. And we hope this day to be a call to action to join the movement to end the incarceration of women and girls around the world. Okay, so now we're going to show a video of lived experience. It's made by IDPC, WOLA, Washington Office on Latin America, and WHRIN for this session.
I was released in a wheelchair after having open heart surgery. I had to have my aorta valve replaced due to the poor health treatments that you get inside the prisons.
They have to know that when they put women in jail, it brings trauma for the family, especially for the children, because they have to spread for a long time.
Mi nombre es Kenia Cuevas, directora de Casa de las Muñecas.
My name is Kenia Cuevas, manager of Casa de las Muñecas and the first home for trans women. Hi, I'm Monica. I was incarcerated for 6 years in Brians prison in Barcelona area for offenses against public policy, public health. And I was a total of 10 years.
Prisons in Indonesia, in Lapas Perempuan Tangerang. For my second sentence, I have a strange situation that I have to go to prison for 5 years and 6 months, plus 6 months in the rehabilitation.
Hello, my name is Phyllis Hardy, also known as Grandma. I am a formerly incarcerated woman who was convicted of a drug conspiracy. I was released from prison, federal prison, in April of 2015 after doing 23 years, 5 months.
Government stopped the campaign of war on drugs because I found things that in this war on drugs campaign, I found so many corruption system and extortion going and moving frame line as the campaign of war on drugs. And it makes us, especially women, more suffer because of war on drugs.
I promised the women that I would not forget them. If I lived to go home, I would fight for their freedom and I would fight for law changes. And that's what I've been doing since I was released from prison.
Actualmente, bueno, hace 2 años trabajo en Mujeres, que es un centro de reducción.
I've been working for 2 years in Mujeres, a harm reduction center for women and non-binary people who are drug users and violence survivors. We are based in El Raval, and they can use the washing machines, and through activism, we involve them in the struggle. I work for the rights of incarcerated people. In Casa de las Muñecas, we fought for the rights of all the population in these vulnerabilities and the criminalization due to drug use. Los servicios sanitarios en la cárcel deben proveer o facilitar programas de tratamiento especializados diseñados para mujeres usuarias de sustancias, teniendo en cuenta están las normas de Bangkok, que dice que las mujeres no deben ser encarceladas por delitos no violentos. All these changes have been created through the empathy of many society sectors who are understanding the criminalization.
To the National Council is to help people inside. I reach inside, write the women. I provide them with information, forms, available resources that can help them survive in the belly of the beast. I also provide the National Council quarterly newsletter to over 1,600 women, so they'll know who to reach out to help them.
Participamos y lideramos.
We participate and lead in days and as some support Don't Punish or Overdose Awareness Day. We also have a group called the Shadud, a group of women who use drugs, and outside the venue we also do paella, street market, and the Metzerradel, where neighbors collaborate and deal with current issues such as the struggles and the violence that we suffer.
Our aim at the National Council is to help the women come home and keep the women from going back in. This way, we can end mass incarceration of women and girls.
Now I joined a collective group of women which born on 3rd of March 2020, which called Women's Voice, and it's a group collective of women and trans women who's using drugs. What we do now, we do some advocacy, paralegal things. We're helping people, especially women and trans women who get caught by the police, because we don't want, when they also already has problem, when they get caught, they have some extortion too from police.
En el equipo también, aparte de yo, hay...
In the team, besides me, there are more girls with lived experience, and this empowered me, especially after leaving incarceration, which made me feel really small. And I think this is also helpful for them. We help each other.
I hope you enjoyed that video. Even though it definitely shows that the incarceration of women and girls is a global problem. And we hope that you come together with us to end the incarceration of women and girls around the world. Now we will do a quick game, a quick responses game, and it'll be a poll. So I'm gonna ask a question that will take 1 minute, and you'll get a chance to chime in on what you think is the answer through the poll, and then we'll show the results. So are you ready to play the game? All right, Aaron, you can cue the first question. How effective do you think rehabilitation is in women's prisons? Very effective, somehow effective, or not effective at all? Go ahead and submit your poll results. Submit your results. All right, so the results are in, and only 3% said very effective. 18% said somehow effective, and 79% said not effective at all. So the vast majority of people here agree with me that they are not effective at all. And so what are we going to do about it? So the next question is, what percentage of women in prison are there for drug offenses worldwide? Aaron, can you cue the next question? What percentage of women in prison are there for drug offenses worldwide? 0 to 20%, 20 to 40%, 40 to 60%, 60 to 80%, or 80 to 100%. Go ahead and submit your answers. Which one do you think is the correct answer? All right, the results are in. 4% said 0 to 20%. 26% said that 20 to 40% of women in prison were in there for drug offenses. 15% said 40 to 60% of women. 44% of you all voted that 60 to 80% of women, and 11% of you all voted that 80 to 100% of women are incarcerated for drug offenses. And the answer is that globally, 35% of women incarcerated are in prison for drugs compared to 20% of men. And this can rise to 60 to 80% in various Latin American and Asian countries. Thailand is actually 82%. So, all right, great work on that. And so we know this is definitely something that we need to address in working to end the incarceration of women and girls from a feminist lens. All right, so Aaron, cue the next question. Do you think that prisons are designed to accommodate women and gender non-conforming people? Yes, the response options are yes, very much so, yes, somewhat, or not at all. Go ahead and cast your answers. All right, the results are in. Only 3% say yes, very much so. 0% say yes, somewhat. But the vast majority of us here, 97%, says not at all. And so the majority of us believe that prisons are not designed to accommodate women and gender non-conforming people. And our experience is that prisons are simply not designed for women and gender non-conforming people. And various speakers will speak about that today. And we'll also see a video from Kenya as a trans woman as well. All right, so Aaron, can you cue the next question? Do you think that prison affects men and women the same way? Yes or no? Do you think that prison affects men and women the same way? Yes or no? Go ahead and submit your responses. All right, so the results are in, and this is the only question where we have 100% voting no. So we all agree that prison does not affect men and women the same way. And so, you know, of course, that there are specific needs and realities of women. You know, most women are primary caregivers of children, are taking care of families. And, you know, you're going to hear a lot about this in the discussion today. Also, the access to basic health care, hygiene products that are specific to women, and access to trainings, etc. And so it's a totally different experience, and we all agree on that. And so we're really excited to hear from our speakers today, who will definitely tell us more about, you know, what the situation is for women. Okay, so now we will go to Grace, and Grace is going to tell us about her experience, and you know, really help us to deeply understand you know, the experience from her perspective. Okay, and also the need to change approaches to drug policy and incarceration. Okay, and participants, you can still share any questions that you have in the chat, or any comments or anything like that that you have, or any other good information that's that you want to share about your work, or alternatives to incarceration or punishment, alternatives to punishment for women that you know in your own country or region. All right. So we're going to hear from Grace first. That's going to be talking about women's voice. We're also going to be hearing from Monica, that's going to be explaining Mujeres. We're going to hear from Claudia talking about Mujeres Libres. We're going to see a video from Kenya about Casa de las Muñecas. And we're going to hear from Phyllis Grandma Hardy about National Council for Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls and the Free Her campaign. All right, Grace.
Okay, thank you, Dawn, for the time. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for giving me time and opportunity to share my life experience. My name is Grace Natalia, and I am a formerly incarcerated woman who has arrested and imprisoned for possession of drugs. Based on the experience I've had and seen, from my arrest to my release, I decided to join a collective group of women called Women's Voice, and I am also on the board of the Women and Harm Reduction International Network. During this cloudy period in prison, I saw many inequalities and losses experienced by women during imprisonment or after their release. The patriarchal nature of Indonesian law, the lack of health facilities relating to women's reproductive issue in women's prison, problems arising because of women's multiple roles in their social life, which are forced to stop because of their arrest. Women arrested for drug offenses to stop because of their offenses also experience that stigma because of our strong culture and religious background in Indonesia, either from the community or the closest family. Then there is the issue of overpopulation in prison in Indonesia that reaches 2 to 5 times over capacity. Okay, can you imagine before that I, with 27 other women, had to be in a cell measuring 3.5 meters by 5 meters, in which there was also a bathroom measuring 2 meters by 1.2 meters, closed from 5 p.m. to 6 a.m. And that's where we also eat dinner, have all activities, and sleep. Following on the issue, a couple of days ago, a tragedy happened here in Jakarta, where 48 inmates in the male prison died due to a fire. They were burned alive because the officers did not have the key on his hand to open the cell doors. This was made worse because of the overcrowding at 5 times the population it should have been. I feel so sad and can imagine the fear and hopelessness, as I had been through something similar when I was in a prison, namely an earthquake. It happened when I and all my fellow prisoners were locked in a cell, and an officer could only open the cell door 10 minutes after the earthquake stopped. We were lucky that time not to be hurt, but still it was terrifying. One thing I want to explain is that in our law, drug users should have the option to go to treatment rather than to prison. However, in practice, women who use drugs tend to have a prison sentence instead of treatment. The justice system still prefers to see us as criminals, with a long minimum sentence for small amounts of drugs, usually a minimum of 4 years. This means a woman who is a mother must be separated from the children for a long time, and that's really traumatizing for the children and also the mothers. This is painfully clear when children visit and it is time for them to leave. It becomes painful when the children cry and do not want to be separated from the mother. Another effect is that because there are, of course, drugs in prison, so it is ironic to think that women can benefit from their time locked away on a cell. My experience in prisons show me firsthand that the system is broken, for sure. Does it not help women to become better citizens and only causes pain to them and their families? The government does not consider the particular impact of the families and the community. So that's why I am motivated to try to improve this problem on behalf of other women to prevent them suffering anxiety. Thank you, Dawn.
Thank you so much, Grace, for telling us about the situation of incarcerated women in Indonesia. Now we will go to Monica. We will hear from Monica, who will speak about the situation of incarcerated women and formerly incarcerated women in Spain. Monica?
Sí, hola. Hola, hola a todas. Gracias, Grace.
Hello to everyone. Thank you, Grace, for your testimony, and thank you to everyone for making this possible. I wanted to explain very briefly the impact that prison had on my life. To begin, and to give you a little bit of context, I began to have problems with drugs when I was 16 years old. I started using heroin, and to find money, I began to steal checkbooks in health centers, and I would, prescription pads, and I would sell prescriptions in the street, and they ended up catching me. I was caught a number of times. And then in 2004, when I was 29 years old, they caught me for the last time. They charged me with a challenge to authority, and I was imprisoned for 12 years. You can imagine, when I entered into prison with this vision of having to spend 12 years there, the sky fell in on me and I could only think about taking drugs. And so there I lived intensely the stigma and criminalization that women drug users experience. And in prison that gets even more intense. I thought that I deserved it. I thought it was normal after having been arrested so many times. But now, from a distance, I think it doesn't resolve anything, and it's a form of torture to confine people. They sell society the idea that this is some kind of rehabilitation, but I don't believe that at all. I think it entails a lot of implicit violence. The impact it had upon my family was enormous. My father came to see me just once to the Barcelona prison, and he started crying and never came again, nor any other member of my family. So they did help me with some money for my expenses. I was in Brians in Martorell, which is far from the city. It's pretty distant from the city. And I was in a module. Prisons are not constructed, or they're not built for women, because we were in, as women always are, in a specific unit within a big prison full of men, and you can see the discrimination that women suffer there. Also in my family, I stopped seeing my daughter for 6 years, and my younger daughter had to be given away in adoption. This was forced. They took me out of I was for 9 months in solitary because of a fight that I had with a companion. She was rude to me and I hit her. And they brought me out of that. They made me sign a paper, and it turns out that paper was I was signing away my daughter in adoption. They said I didn't deserve to have her. When I give talks, people always ask me, how could you not have a normal life after this experience and having overcome prison? And I said, at that moment, there was a series of circumstances. The first circumstances was that I was a teenager. I was 16. I went looking for affection and recognition in the street. I got together with a bunch of other people that also had lots of lacks in their life. We wanted to do crazy things, and we went overboard. And then later, as a 33-year-old woman, I hadn't seen her daughter in 6 years, who my mother was dying of cancer, and she was taking care of my daughter. And I want to highlight also the support I received in my last 2 years of prison from a department specialized in substance problems. And it was the only one of this kind in Catalonia. They closed it 3 years ago in order to set up another prison module for men. So in order to leave behind problematic consumption, you need support, you need motivation, recognition, and that can only be achieved through people, through the family. The group that we created helped me a lot. We gave talks, we fought for the rights of women prisoners, we went to visit them. So when I came out, I decided to study. I signed up for university access for people over 25, which allowed me to study social work. Now I think about why did I do that? And it was it was to return somehow what I felt at that time like I had taken from society. I wanted to work with young people. And I think that we need more awareness of the damage, the often irreparable damage to women who go into prison. And I've seen my companions die of overdose, from suicide, and because they couldn't bear the punishment, the humiliations, and the torture that one experiences in prison. And we now are their voices. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Monica, for telling us about the situation of incarceration and the violence that it does to us as women. So now I will pass it to Claudia. Claudia will be speaking about the incarceration of women in Colombia. Claudia.
Muchas gracias, Dawn.
Thank you very much, Dawn. Hello, good day, good afternoon to everyone, and thank you for the invitation to be here today. I'll tell you that I was in prison for 9 years and 3 months. I got out 4 years ago, and ever since then, I work to defend the human rights of incarcerated women and ex-prisoners. I'd like to tell you a lot of the experiences that I and my companions experienced in prison, violations of our rights, and I've seen how others' rights were also violated when they gave us food that was in bad conditions. We could see on our plates, we could see that the potatoes had worms in them, that the chicken was rotten, lots of other things related to food. The supply of water was not reliable. One had to get up at 1 or 2 in the morning in order to be able to bathe or gather water in bottles, because at 4 o'clock in the morning, there was no longer any water. The bathrooms were filthy all day, which was humiliating. In the cells, the majority of the women had to sleep 5 or 6 women in each cell, even though they were designed for just 2 people. With regard to health, many of us had uterine problems. We were getting hemorrhages and pains, but the gynecological specialists came only once a month. They had a very limited amount of time. They couldn't attend to all of the women that were requesting this service. So over time, over the years that we were in the prison, our situation and our health deteriorated due to the lack of medical attention. They also carried out, not all of the women could access these. Personally, I had access to psychologists, but I never saw the results of those. It was as if they hadn't given them at all. And when I got out of prison, I had colics and hemorrhages. Fortunately, I was able to access the health system thanks to my work. But most women that get out of prison don't have access to health care or medical attention. I remember that the gynecologist that saw me chided me for not having gone to the gynecologist before. And I preferred simply to listen to her rather than to explain to her that I was deprived of my liberty and therefore I hadn't been able to see a gynecologist. So all of this influenced me, and ultimately I had to, my uterus had to be extracted. Other things that I remember have to do with, they always gave us 10 menstrual pads each month, and that was insufficient. We had to get them however we could. We had to buy them at overinflated prices. Many women exchanged them or exchanged their menstrual pads for cigarettes. cigarettes had a higher value with regard to their price outside of the prison. So it became very complicated. Also, lots of women, we saw how the guards used their power to control the women. They hit them, they sprayed gas in their face, they locked them up for as punishment. They wet them with a hose and then left them there wet all night. They handcuffed them with their hands behind their back and sometimes kicked them. I was able to denounce this on some occasions, but I was always, when I did so, I always expected retaliation from the guards against me. Once the guard punished me by switching me to a different prison because I denounced harassment from the director of the prison where I was imprisoned. So I was transferred to a different prison. The transfer of a woman within prison, a transfer is something you never want to experience in prison. It's like, it's not, it's having even less emotional stability. It meant that I wouldn't see my daughter anymore. It was much more difficult to communicate. I had to leave my daughter when she was 4. After I was incarcerated, she suffered sexual abuse from her father with whom she was living. In Colombia, in the Constitutional Court, we tried to resolve this problem, but so far nothing has changed. Women in prison are still living in the same situation, sometimes even worse than the ones that I experienced years ago. The terrible aspects of these prison conditions have gotten even worse since the arrival of COVID-19. Many women have died because of it. Many of the measures taken by the government in order to respond to the pandemic even deepened the problem that was already existing, and even more rights were violated. As an example, I'll describe the Bogota women's prison. There are prisoners that have not been able to visit with their families for over a year and a half. This has an enormous emotional and psychological impact both on the prisoners and on their family members. In the men's prisons, they've already been able to have visits, but in the women's prison, they still can't. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Claudia, for sharing. And I'm sure people are starting to see some commonalities from what these brave women have been sharing. And that's one thing that we also notice when we come together. So now we will go to a video from Kenya Cuevas, who, as I mentioned, is not able to be here today and is the founder of Casa de las Muñecas Tiresias and Casa Hogar Paola Buenrostro. Hope you enjoyed the video.
Hola, ¿cómo están? Mi nombre es Kenia Cuevas.
Hello, my name is Kenia Cuevas. I'm the director of the Casa de Muñecas Tiresias and also the founder of I'm a 49-year-old trans woman from Mexico. I was deprived of my liberty for 10 years, 8 months, and 7 days while I was in prison. The situation for trans women is tremendously violent, full of exclusion, and the experiences of extreme violence within the prison. I was a woman who was raped while I was in the prison. I was charged with different domestic responsibilities within the prison, and the institution violated my right to my identity and physical integrity at every moment. However, they also situated me in a room, in a cell, specifically for persons with HIV. And I saw how we were used as guinea pigs to test different antiretroviral medications, which provoked or cost the life of a number of imprisoned persons. In this process, I had to experience over 200 injections into my arms, and I had to see many people die due to the consequences of HIV in the prison. But it allowed me to prepare myself to accompany these women who experience total legal, institutional, and even family abandonment, both due to their HIV positive status and their reality, their gender identity. I trained myself to be a accompaniment in order to accompany trans women deprived of their liberty. Within my time in the prison, I had so many experiences of impotence, of pain, frustration, and these things provoked in me great resentment towards the society, towards my family, to the other, my fellow prisoners. Now I'm a woman who had to go through a process of forgiveness within the prison. I had to forgive those who have attacked me, but also those who felt attacked by me. Through this process, I came to understand what happiness is, and I became able to stop using drugs, which was the reason for which I had been imprisoned in the first place. Those of us that are in prison, we experience structural abandonment. There is no legal representation by the public defenders to whom we have a right. But when you enter prison, you suffer a legal abandonment without any representation, which means that you can live in prison for many years without having any representation. All of this has marked me as a person, as a human being. And now I've decided to help and accompany those women who are deprived of their liberty and those who are being released now. I'm also a survivor and a persistent woman who has been able to survive and move on through this experience, which was also a moment of tremendous learning. I came from the street, and in the prison, I was able to create a family and have a place to sleep. I learned this in the prison because from my childhood, I had never experienced that. And I also recognized that, and I thank the prison for that. I can tell you that I'm now a free woman, an empowered woman, and a woman who will fight every day to construct better aspects in this society for trans women. Thank you.
That was amazing, and also very sad, just like a lot of the things that we've been hearing from all of the women here today. And so, we're going to talk about our initiatives in a little bit, but now I'm going to Phyllis Grandma Hardy to speak about her experience of being incarcerated in the United States and what it's like for women in the United States that are incarcerated. Grandma?
Yes, hello. Thank you for inviting me on this. I feel privileged and honored to be here. Thank you, Coletta. Yes, I'm going to speak about how women feel. And what I'm going to do is two types of women coming into prison. And one I'm speaking on because I mentored so many women in prison while I was there because of their conditions. So many women, like the first one, they come in abused, they come in frightened, they come in scared, they're hurt, they're emotionally disturbed, they're upset for leaving their children, they're defeated. They have no get up and go with them because of everything that has happened to them through the trial. And I'll speak on that later when I talk about the conviction of drug people. Then there's the other people that come into prison. They're the strong ones in a way. They are angry. They're angry at the system. They're angry at the people that put them there. 9 out of 10 times, they're innocent. Women never know what men do. And most men, when they get sentenced, they take a plea bargain. The women, very seldom they take plea bargains because they don't know nothing. They don't know where drugs come from. They're just involved with someone doing drugs. And the system is set up so they take everybody. They don't care who they take. Now they get into prison and they got male guards. They got people that don't care. The least little thing you do, they want to throw you into a segregation. In fact, a lot of women coming in, these mild women, scared women, they put them in segregation because they don't have a bed for them. By the time they come out of segregation, they're so messed up. They don't want to talk to nobody. They're afraid of everybody until they learn that there's someone there that cares about them. There's so many women in prison for drugs. And these are the ones that suffer the most because of so many different laws. But what we have to do is when an officer hear you in your cell trying to get dressed, and he wants to come by just because he know you just got out the shower, so he can make you an offer. But now it's two sides. When we go in prison, we're sexually shut off from the world. So we want some loving too. Like always, us women are looking for it in the wrong places. And that affects us. That turns us into something else. But let me go back to when you enter prison. Your first experience is when they tell you to get naked. Then they put you in a cell naked. It's cold, you're crying, you're scared. And they're asking you what sizes you wear. You know that there's a man right between you and that door, but you don't know if he might come in there because you saw him when you came in. So you're messed up from that minute. My experience, I will tell you, I left court. They handcuffed me in court when they found me guilty of conspiracy. They hadn't sentenced me yet. What they did was they sent me to a county jail. I was in a county jail that had 3-tier bunks for women. The pregnant women, it was so crowded, they had them on the floor. I gave the pregnant woman my bed because I have compassion. I understand. Maybe I'm stronger than most because I was so angry. Anger makes you strong, makes you want to fight. The other way, you don't fight. Then they sent me on a plane after I got sentenced, right from the courthouse, to a CC place in Leavenworth, Kansas. That far away from my family. I stayed there 6 months. Then they picked me up, took me on another plane to Georgia, stayed there for a week, left there, and they took me to Florida, to the max, way away from my family again. Then after almost 3 years, I was able to go to Danbury. I was in Danbury, FCI. for 13 years. I went to the camp. I stayed in the camp for 5 years. I left there and was transported to Carswell, Texas, to get a knee. I got a knee there. They gave me a knee that didn't open. I'm still crippled from it. Then, when I found out I was going home, because the judge had signed my release and gave me time served, I didn't go home for a month later, but I was free because my aorta valve burst and I had to have open heart surgery. So I had to wait another month. Now I'm afraid. I'm afraid I'm not going to live to go home. I'm afraid I might not be able to walk home. But I owe my freedom to the National Council that had a Free Her rally to free Grandma and a few others. They fought for me. That is why my judge gave me my freedom. And I will never forget that. And I will always fight for the women that I left behind. So I think my 5 minutes is up. And if you have any questions, I will answer them for you.
Thank you so much, Grandma. We appreciate you for sharing. And we appreciate all of the women here for sharing. We know that this is a very heavy discussion. So definitely take a deep breath and take care of yourself in whatever way feels good. But our experiences in prison are terrible, to be honest. But what we've experienced, it doesn't have to be this way for other women. We want to change it so that other people don't have to experience the same things that we have. And we don't have to end with these stories of trauma and violence of what we've experienced. So we're gonna shift the discussion on what we can do from here. How can we change approaches to drug policy and to incarceration? How can we, what are alternatives that exist or that we can create? And what is the work that the women here are doing to fight back, to make sure that other women don't go through the same things? So in the chat, you can answer this question. What other good alternatives to incarceration are there for women in your country or region? What other good alternatives to incarceration, not inside a jail or prison or connected to the prison system, are there for women in your country or region? Please share that in the chat. And you can also share any questions or comments. I know some people already have. And, we're going to go on to now a discussion from our speakers speaking about their initiatives, their work to fight back. And so we're going to go back to Grace.
So,
To talk about women's voice.
okay. Thank you, Dawn. Thank you for time again. And salute for everybody that already shared. It inspired me. And now I will tell a bit about Women's Voice and what we are doing now. Women's Voice is a collective group of women and trans women based in Jakarta. Women's Voice was established on 3rd of March 2020 initiated by 6 women and trans women, leaders from different parts of Jakarta. Our goal is to create new leaders who can advocate for women and trans women who use drugs, who otherwise lack voice in public. Women who use drugs have been framed into one worthless box, where they are seen as bad women, criminals, and a threat to mainstream society, where judges and patriarchal systems try to make an example of us while ignoring our humanity and violating our rights. As we know, Indonesian society is strongly patriarchal, silencing women who are not given access to the same opportunities as men, and remain less and least in access to privilege. Women who use drugs are not only excluded from opportunities, but are actively punished by both the law and the society, ordered by women who choose to use substance and not fit within patriarchal expectations. We have a situation where any health services available to drug users in Indonesia are set up to be useful to men, but remain gender blind and other inaccessible or irrelevant to women. Society is encouraged by bad drug policy to strip us of our dignity and our basic rights. Women's voice function to push back against this injustice, to assert the voice of women who use drugs as valid, feminist, and unignorable. We receive paralegal training, so now we can help and assisting crisis cases among women and trans women in Greater Jakarta. As we grow, we have formed functional partnerships with other agencies, such as a government agency for the protection of women and children. We also provide socialization among women who use drugs to describe women's rights and other human rights. And often women have not been aware because of their cultural background and repressive religious methods, all of which are rooted in patriarchal culture. In this way, we try to help women reclaim their lives and a stake in society. We are also developing a safe house with a support system for women who are released from prison and have no place to live because of economic problems or are not accepted by the community and their families. The safe house is also for women and trans women who use drugs, who have problems with violence, or whatever problems they face. They can come to our safe house for safe place, temporary enforcement, and support. In the future, we hope to become an organization that can accommodate the needs of women and trans women, able to provide economic relief, empowerment, and case assistance. And our vision is of Indonesia, where women who use drugs are no longer persecuted by the patriarchy, no longer afraid of losing custody of their children, no longer subject to violence, stigma, and discrimination, and who are not treated simplistically as the criminals. We are aware that in order for all of our vision to realize, we still have to go through a long journey, but we are determined. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Grace, for telling us about your work in Indonesia. Thank you so much for your work. We are so honored to be here with you. And so now we will go to Monica. Monica from Spain to explain the
Hola.
work of Mujeres.
Hola. Bueno, pues os explico el
Hello.
proyecto.
So I'll tell you a little bit about the project. Mujeres is a space for women and non-binary persons who use drugs and survive violence. It's the first harm reduction center specifically for women in Catalonia. It's located in Raval, which is a specific neighborhood in Barcelona, where there are apartments dedicated to drug consumption. There are also harm reduction centers within the neighborhood, but their women find themselves in a minority surrounded by lots of men. Mujeres is a space, what we talk about it as a place of reprieve, a place where we can attend to basic needs, as well as being active participants in the search for alternatives and political policies. There are activities based on our interests and activities. We all contribute and we feel empowered by those women that use drugs. It's very difficult that they enter into the specialized services or the health system, because the system is all really sexist. They exclude women's situations, and there's a structural lack that generates further exclusion and marginalization. In the case of women, there's also a lot of prejudice and stigma and discrimination that continually violates their rights. So Mujeres is a very young project. It's only been operating for 4 years. It's been working since 2016. Last year, we constituted ourselves as a cooperative, a nonprofit, and we've been recognized for our innovative practices. Some over 300 women have participated over the last 4 years. And to give you some data, last year, 204 women participated over the course of 2020. 69% don't have a home. Many have problems of mental health. Many have issues related to drug use, and a very high number have been imprisoned. The majority of the latter have been imprisoned for drug-related reasons. From Mujeres, that we go to make visits to the prisons to provide clothing and also provide legal counsel. We seek out additional resources for when they exit prison. We've tried to coordinate with the legal system in order to propose alternatives. They've worked with us in some of the workshops and thus avoid imprisonment. For some of these women, the prison does not resolve their problems. We hope that in the future we can do a lot more in this regard. If I had to say just 3 brief things about Mujeres and what's different about it from other harm reduction spaces, first, I would say it's only for women. We construct it together amongst ourselves. There are no expulsions. We dismantle the culture of punishment. There's a recovery of consciousness and awareness, each one working within her circumstances. And also different is the activity that we carry out in the neighborhood. People know us for the last 4 years. We work together with the neighbors against stigma and criminalization that drug-using women often face. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for all of your great work, for letting us know about it. We really appreciate you, Monica. All right, now we go to Claudia, talking about the great work of Mujeres Libres. Claudia.
Gracias, Dawn.
Thank you, Dawn. Mujeres Libres is an organization of women that have suffered prison, who have either been in prison ourselves or we have family members in prison. We say we suffer prison because it's not only a matter of being deprived of your liberty. We know that prison doesn't only deprive us of this right, but also of many other rights as well. So we look at it in that way. We seek to eliminate suffering for women and their families, fomenting alternatives to prison. And while we're working on that, we try to mitigate the negative effects of the prison itself based on mutual support and solidarity, promoting economic autonomy, awareness, social awareness raising, and in defending the rights of those women that are in prison and those who have left prison. We call out to human organizations. We realize they spoke to us about the basic rules, and that's served as a point of departure for our work, because we knew that many of our rights had been violated or transgressed. But when we left the prison and we saw, we said, why didn't we know we had these rights before? Why does the state hide these rights in such a way that we can't demand them? We feel that everything that's each one of us felt that everything that had happened to us was happening to us individually. But then when we got together, we realized that this was happening to all of us, that it was systematic. And we saw these violation of our rights both within the prison and once we left. So based on that, we began to study and learn together. What we're most interested in and what we want is to visibilize this situation, the whole problematic of women in prison, and to advocate for our rights. Sometimes our eyes are looking at what's going on in the prison, but society also doesn't know what happens to women when they leave prison. This whole issue. Society judges any crime, and they say that they must deserve it, or they're not taking advantage of their opportunities. But the question is, what are those opportunities? What are the opportunities you're talking about? If before you got into prison or when you left prison, they didn't exist. Besides, the processes of resocialization that the government talks about don't actually work. They don't help us establish our liberty. Those of us that have been in prison and those of us that are aware of the issue, we can't open a bank account, for example, by virtue of having been in prison, much less request a loan for a entrepreneurial initiative, for example. Nor can we ask for anything from our families, because if we're seen as bad mothers or women who left our families. So what we look for, what we're aiming for, is a policy and awareness within the society about this problem that has been that starts far before the entry into prison. It has to do with access to opportunities, to resources. We want for women's prisons to cease to exist. For women, for families, the communities, we don't need prisons, and prisons don't work, as we've already heard. From Mujeres Libres, we've proposed various different activities. Together with Corporacion and Humanas, we started to bring together sort of a food drive in relation to the pandemic. Many women, when they leave prison are doing informal work and selling things on the street, and therefore they couldn't work during the confinement, and their families had nothing to eat. So we're now collecting resources for menstrual health together with various other organizations. And this campaign tries not only to gather these supplies, but we're also doing capacity building with these women, and we're focusing on reproductive health and menstrual health. We've done a lot of advocacy with accompaniment in spaces like the monitoring committee that monitors sentencing and the whole issue of prisons here in Colombia and the Constitutional Court. We've participated in public audiences in the Congress of the Republic. We've also participated in public audiences with the Inter-American tribunals. So we're focused on advocacy in order to change this whole situation in a real and lasting way. In addition to this, and to conclude, we want to say that there's not just Mujeres Libres in Colombia, it's a movement that has grown. There's also Mujeres Libres in Chile, in El Salvador, in Mexico. There's also the inter-Latin American network of free women, of Mujeres Libres, working on these issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Claudia, for your leadership and just letting us know about the phenomenal work that you do. Thank you so much. Now we will go to Phyllis Grandma Hardy, talking about the work of the National Council for Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls in the Free Her campaign. Oh, sorry, before I pass it to you, Grandma, I just want to name that we're going a few minutes over. For those that are able to stay with us, we would love to have you stay on. So we're going just a few minutes over, and I will pass it to Grandma.
Thank you, Dawn. Okay, the National Council. We were founded and we work. We are all formerly incarcerated women that have founded, and we are staff. What we work under is 3 pillars. The pillars are policy, make it hybrid, local organizing, which is under reimagining communities, and state and national campaigns. Our national campaigns is the Free Her campaign, the clemency tours, the clemency, fighting for the women to get clemency, and making the states aware that we want them to stand up, the governors, and give clemencies to the women that is incarcerated, that are sick, they are older, they are survived and punished. All of these people should come home, besides people that are long-termers. We also have a prison closure campaign. We have, I made a list because there's so many things that the National Council do. Excuse me. We have a freight, that's an economic development. We do participatory defense. We do participatory budgeting. We do all of this to help us end incarceration of women and girls. They right now just finished the New England states clemency tours, very successful. The last one they did was Massachusetts. And I believe, if I'm not correct, I might be wrong, but they went to at least 6 or 7 different cities in Massachusetts. They rallied, they had posters, they had signs. There are lots of videos. If you go on the National Council Facebook page or the website, you will see all the things that they are doing. I'm sure I'm missing a couple of things. We've got the primary caretakers bill that we're working on. We've got the decriminalized drug bill, the 1994 drug bill that we're fighting. And as my job, as the in-reach outreach advocate, I reach into all the prisons. I gather up all the information from inside, from the women that is affected by all these different laws and everything. And this material I pass on to the staff of the National Council so they know what bills to work on, what to work on when they go to the sentencing committee, when they go to Congress, when they go to the round table, what things need to be discussed so that they can change this. They talk about prison life. You know, we started with the Dignity Act to give the women tampons and all those things that they needed in prison that they weren't getting, and you had to pay for them. With making, I can't even remember how much they make a day, maybe $1 or something. You can't buy that. You can't buy the things you need. You have to buy your soap powder. That's $5 a box. There's no way for women to be able to survive with the way the system is set up. And this is what the National Council fights for. As you already know, we organized ourselves in prison with Andrea James, our leader. And when she came home, she started fighting right away. And she sponsored the first Free Her rally that I spoke of earlier. And I hope I gave you enough information about who and what the National Council is about. And thank you for letting me speak. Love you all. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Grandma. And we always love to hear you. You are a matriarch, our grandma, and thank you so much for explaining the work of the National Council for Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls. So now we will see a video about the work of Happy. Happy is from the Tanzanian network of people who use drugs. And so we'll just let the video speak for itself.
Hello, my name is Happy Hassan, and I work with the Tanzanian network of people who use drugs, and also I support and I direct the woman-led organization known as Salvage that support women who use drugs and youth. Salvage was formed in 2011 but got registered in 2018. We've been dealing with shelter services, but there's so many things lacking, and this causes so many problems to shift women from the shelter to hospitals or other areas, including taking them from where they stay on the camps to the shelter, as we were supposed to keep the shelter a little bit out of the town area in order to avoid issues of police or any issues that will interact with the large community. For now, we are helping them to stay there and at least a meal, but hopefully that is getting to an end, and I've been struggling to see how best we can help. We are also trying to deal with legal. We've been supporting women who get issues of violence in different areas with their partners or with families or with just within the community itself and society at large. But now lately I've been working with international organizations, different partners with the national national NGO that works with within New York to help people who have been incarcerated, and they're very supportive. We've got several trainings, and including that, we hope to work more with different partners, WHRIN, Coletta, with other organizations, and I hope we're going to secure some support so that to mentor some paralegal members here at home in Tanzania, so that we can be able to support people when they have cases, women and youth. Lately our jails are not friendlier. They have so many people who use drugs piled up with smaller cases, and there was a time when we defended the law, and it was changed into like if someone is being caught with 1 pinch, 2 for his own use, can be linked to medical care or rehabs or sober houses. But lately they've been signed another new law, a drug law, that says any amount that anyone will be caught with, it will be a criminal case, which means even a small, or being caught with a pipe, I mean a marijuana piece, one can be taken for a longer time of period, which is not friendly. And now I'm trying to find support so that I can put down a letter, a recommendation letter, and send to the state, to the member state in Dodoma. So I'll have to travel to Dodoma, and at the same time work with several organizations and institutes, including DCA, so that we can defend this and say that this is not right. As now the law is waiting for the president to sign, and I think it's time for us now to stand above this law. So I hope you and many more other people will be able to stand together with us here and defend this and fight for this law to be cancelled. So this is my short presentation, history of salvage, and I hope we're gonna be working together, collaborate in order to change what is not friendlier here in my place. Thank you so much. Hope to get working with you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Happy. So now we're going to show a video about the global campaign to eliminate violence against women who use drugs.
Stigma, gender inequality, and criminalization have combined to create conditions where violence is not only common, but also, in practical terms, effectively sanctioned and endorsed. WHRIN advocacy works to bring these conditions into sharp relief and to promote immediate and longer-term normative guidance to respond to and ultimately end such human rights violations against women who use drugs. For example, with the support of the Robert Carr Fund, WHRIN has been able to coordinate a small grants program to enable campaigns led by women who use drugs to call attention to systemic violence against our community in respective local or national contexts. The Eva Wood campaign is growing each year and already has been enhanced by partnership engagement from networks such as Euronpud and Youth Rise. Flashing through this presentation are images and participant quotes from the 2019 and 2020 campaigns, which were run across more than 20 countries. They give you a glimpse of the energy, bravery, creativity, and determination of the activists involved. The Eva Wood campaign activities have included awareness raising, correcting of negative perceptions, and the presentation of requests and demands for rectification in the form of social media blitzes, the launch of lived experience books, videos and webinars, art and sport activities, press releases, public marches, demonstrations and rallies, podcasts, storytelling, formal meetings with parliamentarians, police, community lawyers, health officials and women's ministries, national symposiums, music concerts with bespoke rap performances, letter writing to women who use drugs in prison, art therapy, empowerment and self-defense classes, and more.
Ahora voy a hablar sobre el gran proyecto de Casa de las Muñecas Tiresias, que es una organización civil que nace a través de presenciar el transfeminicidio de Paola Buenrostro, una mujer trans de 24 años que era trabajadora sexual y fue asesinada el 30 de septiembre del 2016. Haber presenciado este transfeminicidio, pues me tuve que enfrentar a exigir justicia, y al exigir justicia, pues me tuve que enfrentar también a muchas violaciones a derechos, mucha discriminación institucional, social, gubernamental. Y en ese proceso, pues constituimos Casa de las Muñecas el 2 de abril del 2018, el cual pensábamos brindar acompañamientos a todas las poblaciones en situación de vulnerabilidad en procesos de salud, educación, vivienda, identidad. Y bueno, pues nos fuimos percatando de una necesidad muy específica que vivían las personas trans que ejercían el trabajo sexual, ya que abandonaban sus procesos. Y los abandonaban por ciertas situaciones que yo perfectamente las entiendo. Muchas de las veces no trabajaban lo suficiente para pagar su hotel y su comida y pues tenían que seguir trabajando. Otras de las ocasiones terminaban agotadas a las 7, 8 de la mañana, que era cuando les tocaba sus citas. En ese proceso construimos en la estructura de Casa de las Muñecas una iniciativa o un proyecto que sería Casa Hogar Paola Buenrostro, que es un hogar donde les brindamos a las mujeres trans, ¿no?, que vivieron situaciones de vulnerabilidad, y les ofertamos principalmente educación, donde tienen una ciberescuela y a través del INEA van certificando educación básica. También tienen talleres dirigidos a la autonomía económica, el cual van construyendo ellas mismas pues toda una empoderamiento, ¿no?, para cualquier aprendizaje que les pueda retribuir económicamente en algún momento en su futuro. También tienen talleres de cultura, de adicciones, de deportes, de cultura, y todos estos talleres que van construyendo las personas. También tienen un acompañamiento muy puntual al área de salud, donde monitoreamos todos sus aspectos de salud, y un acompañamiento de salud mental. Y al final del proceso tienen una vinculación al área laboral, el cual construimos a través de las herramientas que brindamos en Casa Hogar, pues toda una metodología para que las chicas puedan entender que el trabajo sexual sea una opción laboral y no la única opción que la sociedad nos ha marcado. En México, las mujeres trans tienen una perspectiva de vida de 35 a 40 años, cuando de una persona cisgénero es de 80 años. Y eso tiene que ver por todas las interseccionalidades de violencia a las que se enfrentan desde el momento que deciden ser trans. Empiezan a vivir discriminación, principalmente por su familia, después en la sociedad, y después se colocan en el trabajo sexual, donde se enfrentan a procesos de sustancias psicoadictivas, encarcelamiento y todos estos procesos de violencia, que es un círculo vicioso que no les ayuda para nada para salir de esa violencia. Sin embargo, lo que oferta Casa Hogar Paola Buenrostro es una alternativa de vida, donde las mujeres se van deconstruyendo, construyendo y volviendo a construir para mejorar esas condiciones y llegar a una calidad de vida y una independencia. Y lo que queremos es generar mujeres empoderadas, mujeres libres y mujeres dignas de poder transitar en este país. Muchas gracias.
So thank you all who have stuck with us, even though we've gone over just a little bit. You will see a call to action in the chat. We're seeking to build global solidarity with currently and formerly incarcerated women and girls. So look at the information about that. That will be dropped in the chat. And we just want to thank everyone, all of the participants, all of the panelists that came today. And this session has been recorded and is on the Facebook Live. So please share widely on social media. Thank you for your time today and have a great rest of the day. Thank you.